Welcome to Masters of Supply Chain Weekly Digest. I'm your host, David Warrick, and I'm joined today by my good friend, Nadim Kilzi. So, Nadim brings a wealth of real industry experience. He was Chief Supply Chain Officer at PLZ. He was SVP at Keurig Dr. Pepper. He's got a past experience in Starbucks and before that, Kraft Foods. So, Nadim, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's great to see you.
It's a pleasure, David. Good to see you again.
And you're with me up in the Pacific Northwest. So we do have a storm warning happening this afternoon, which doesn't make any sense for us because we don't really see that those real harsh weathers. But now I'm saying, the alerts that I'm getting are golf ball sized hailstones. So my wife asked me what to do, and I said, well, I guess I should take out my golf clubs because if there's going to be that amount of hail, then I might as well do something useful with it. So, but listen, thanks for joining me this morning. As always, just a crazy week in supply chain. Um, I really would like to stop talking about tariffs, but I feel that I can't. And we're now on the run up to I call it the fear of impending doom. We're now all really waiting to see what happens on April the 2nd and these reciprocal tariffs. What are you hearing? What are you reading?
So I'm not thinking there's going to be doom. We've been through this cycle before. It's like playing that videotape over and over again every 2 weeks. I think April 2nd is going to come and go, and we're going to find ourselves in a better place, hopefully. If not, we'll have some more certainty in what we should do. I'm glad it's not April 1st. We would be having a different conversation on whether that's real or not. But I'm hoping that April 2nd is going to come with some better news than what we've been planning for us all in supply chain. But at a minimum, a little bit more certainty that we can bank on and start building plans and executing.
I hope so, and I do think that there's an element of this which is around getting a better deal and using the bargaining chips that you have at your disposal. There was an interesting article that I read this week about the Mar-a-Lago Accord. I don't want to dive into it here, but it was kind of interesting in terms of from an economic perspective, what would a longer term plan actually look like, and how would that, what are the opportunities in the short term and the challenges? But your background is very much in food and beverage. How are the food and beverage companies thinking about this right now? What's on their mind?
Yeah, I think some of it is just standard basic supply chain parameters, right? You look for cost, you look for capacity, you look for continuity. Those are the same. They're agnostic to whether you're sourcing electronics or apparel or a beverage. Other things tend to be a little bit more specific to the food industry. If you've got, say, certifications with a supplier overseas for organic or allergens, those are particular to the food industry. And if you're changing sources or adding another source so that you can have diversity in supply and more continuity, you're going to have to go get certification again. You have to go into these suppliers, have conversations, do inspections, collect data. I mean, it's a hassle, but it's necessary. So that's added work. And again, the sooner there's certainty about where those tariffs are going to apply or not apply and the amount of tariffs, the sooner, the faster leaders in supply chain can go and get those things done. Um, Traceability tends to be another element to verify. And if you're shifting countries of origin, you want to make sure you know exactly where your product is coming from. That's another source of work. Yeah, I'll use an example. Like, a lot of companies consume, or we all consume plant-based beverages, for example. The majority of those are manufactured in the United States, converted in the United States, so you don't think twice about them. But the ingredients say it's oat-based milk. Well,
Yeah.
where does the oat come from? It comes from Canada, most of it. So is that going to have tariffs applied to it? Are we going to have to go find a different source of oat? Um, Obviously, this is something that's grown. You can't convert overnight to a different field.
Yeah.
There's
Literally,
agronomy.
yes.
Right. There's agronomy, there's seeds, there is, if it's, non-GMO sourced, there's complexities associated with that. and for companies to pivot overnight to go from one source to another, it's going to be quite difficult. So those are things that come to mind as someone who's been in the food and beverage industry.
No, it's really interesting because, again, as we've talked on previous news digests, we've talked about what options are open for suppliers in terms of, the ability to change geography, the ability to source from alternate places, and that risk of compliance is actually something that is very real. And also very damaging potentially to the brand if it's not done properly. And all of those certifications and those elements of compliance, they take time. It's not something that you can do overnight. It takes a lot of research, and then you have to worry about continuity of supply and the quality of supply. But then also those certifications are actually required, especially in food and beverage, to make sure that, healthy products are being built and those are being, distributed at the same time. So I think it's a great call out to say, this isn't just about resilience. This isn't just about, hey, I can now pick up and go to a more tariff friendly country to be able to, if you like, avoid those costs. It's like, but you don't just do that. You don't just pick something up and drop it the next day. It takes months, if not years, of research, of the ability to actually build that surrounding infrastructure to get it right. And with these tariffs coming down, as we've continually said, there's two choices. You either absorb that cost internally and hurt your own P&L, or you pass it on to the consumer. And which is the easiest?
Yeah, exactly, David. I think in the short term, you don't have a choice. Those are the two questions. Either I take it to my P&L or I pass it on, and there's consequences if you pass it on to consumers who are now very uncertain about the economy. Chances are you're going to see an impact on your revenue, potentially on the bottom line, regardless. I do think so. What can we do in the short term? That's what I'm thinking is in the short term, between now and at least April 2nd, what we should understand is um, what is in my Gantt chart, right? What's the critical path? If I were to go, picking up the certification path again, there aren't that many companies that can do this. So you're talking about constraints in the supply chain. Now, potentially, we're talking about people who can do certifications, whether it's in the US or in some new country. So pull up your Rolodex and list out the people that you should contact right now and understand what's their lead time, right? How much is it going to cost? Do they have capabilities to go to a different country to do the inspections, the validations, the verifications that you need to get done? So, but, now is the time to do as much prep work as you can to prepare for what happens after April 2nd.
And so, I think it's another one of those situations where we have to hurry up and wait. To your earlier point, I'm really hoping that there's some semblance of real thought that goes into what this reciprocal tariff situation will look like. It may not be as bad as everybody thought it was going to be. And then hopefully it starts to settle down to allow companies to actually start to plan and allow supply chains to actually, think beyond a 24-hour window in terms of the decisions that they have to make. But it's probably good advice to say, irrespective, having that diversification in supply chain is not necessarily a bad thing anyway. And if you hadn't been thinking about it, it might not be a bad time to actually think about it.
Absolutely. You're spot on, David. I think in prior podcasts, we talked about do not let a good crisis go to waste. Do not let a good disruption go to waste, right? This is good reflection internally to understand your operational flexibility, understand what contingency plans you have, understand what your cash availability is, just to understand internally what are the parameters and maybe update all those parameters internally to understand what levers you're going to go pull to reduce the impact organizationally and on your business. So it is a disruption. It's going to cause people and organizations to think about their plans, to think about their agility, to think about capabilities. I think automation comes to mind as well. Maybe now is the time to go press on those buttons. Automation gives you the ability to project, get better forecast accuracy, but also remove some of the uncertainty that you might have in labor planning, in connecting the dots globally. And when I say automation, I'm not just talking about AI intellectually, right? The capability to do analytics, but also automation in terms of robotics, hard
Right.
equipment wise, those things that enable companies to be more flexible. This is the time to rethink and dust off those plans.
And it's a great segue, Nadim, because my passion is around, technology driving supply chain forward. But, while we're all concentrated on tariffs and that's the main topic of conversation, it's great to see that supply chain is continuing to evolve. So Amazon, there's a story this week about Amazon's new warehouse in, I think it's North Carolina, 3 million square feet, but it's going to be one of their most automated facilities. And with that layer of automation from a physical standpoint, it really opens the door for the power of artificial intelligence to actually drive that automation. So it's incredibly exciting to hear that companies are still, they're still investing and they're still trying to build that next generation lower touch supply chain. And to your point, like this is the kind of one of those perfect examples of there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of data. How do you make the best use of that uncertainty and the data that you have to start to think through the different scenarios? And that's kind of the obvious use case for artificial intelligence in my eyes.
Totally, totally. I mean, there are benefits from localizing, right? Despite the fear of what's going to happen to my costs, because obviously in the US there has been regulations that have been prohibitive to deal with. There are advantages. If your supply chain is now within the four walls or the boundaries of your own country, you have more control over what happens. The speed to market is going to accelerate. Your ability to de-risk the geopolitical freight issues, right? That's
Right.
going to be within your control, within reach. You know exactly which highways your product is going to travel on, and you know that there isn't going to be some geopolitical issue that may interfere with your freight line. Um, Definitely from a flexibility, from an agility perspective, there's benefits from localizing that
Yep.
companies are now bringing back to the table and saying, hey, I'm going to make this investment. Some things are going to go negative on me, but there's also some positive things that we should consider in this new equation.
And it is, that careful balance between, short term and long term, and making sure that you're not making knee-jerk decisions based on a short-term event, that there is that sort of more long-term planning. Nadim, we could talk all day. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks everyone for listening. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to our channel. If you don't, please let us know and we'll change it up. Thank you so much, Nadim, for joining me today and look forward to talking to you shortly.
Great conversation, David.